responding to Donald Trump's tariffs, has conducted or is conducting a review of our decision to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets made by American company Lockheed Martin. Of course, this has been a long story, this fighter jet procurement to replace the aging fleet of CF-18s.
Behold a shocking turn in the history of diplomacy. The ambassador of one of the world's leading powers has caused a diplomatic explosion right in the heart of the Canadian capital. This incredible stunt, already being called one of the most sensational international scandals of the decade, has stirred up not only politicians, but all of us. Imagine a quiet conference on critical natural resources, discussing the future of the economy and relations between countries, suddenly turns into an arena for unprecedented insults and threats. This is not the plot of a Hollywood action movie, it really happened. The U.S. representative, known for his loud and controversial statements, took the stage and literally blew up public opinion with his harsh accusations and bold statements. He accused Canada of interfering in the elections, criticized the country's economic policy, and, most surprisingly, attacked the personal dignity and even the leadership of Canada in the most humiliating way. Like a scene from a bad political thriller, this diplomat jeopardized the long-standing friendly relations between the two countries, fueling conflicts and exacerbating tensions to the limit. But behind this high-profile speech lies much more than just an emotional outburst and personal animosity. It is a frightening signal that the traditional rules of diplomacy may be permanently broken, that respect between states is taking a back seat to political games and personal ambitions. What is the reason for this? Why has the representative of one of the most powerful countries suddenly changed from a peacemaker to an aggressive provocateur? And how will this affect the economy, security, and international alliances? The answers to these questions are not only intriguing, but also make us think about the consequences of such a sharp breakdown in diplomatic norms. Details, intrigue, exclusive comments from experts and political analysts. All this awaits you right now. You will learn how one careless step can lead to a diplomatic crisis that will affect not only politicians, but every citizen of the country. Get ready to uncover the secrets of behind-the-scenes games, the real motives, and what lies behind this sensational statement. Don't miss it. An exciting investigation awaits you, revealing the truth about international relations in an era of unprecedented political challenges. How will Canada respond? How far will this diplomatic conflict go? And who will ultimately emerge victorious in this complex and unpredictable game for power and influence? Stay with us. It will be heated, scandalous, and unexpected. Only here and only now will you be the first to hear everything. This video will change your perception of international politics and open your eyes to the intrigues that are carefully hidden from the general public. Don't miss your chance to stay up to date with the major events that are already shaping the future of our countries and the world as a whole. A diplomatic storm has erupted in the center of the Canadian capital that could radically change relations between Canada and the United States. It all started with a tense conference on critical mineral resources and trade negotiations, topics that require the utmost caution and professionalism. However, instead of a business discussion, the attention of those gathered was captured by a sensational speech by the American ambassador, known for his controversial statements, who could not contain his emotions and staged a real diplomatic feast during the plague. His speech not only violated all norms of diplomacy, but also blew up public opinion, jeopardizing years of close cooperation between the two neighboring countries. This diplomat, who had previously become famous for high-profile incidents while working abroad, surpassed himself this time, not hesitating to cross all boundaries of decency. Without warning, and in front of the delegates, he accused Canada of interfering in the U.S. elections, causing a wave of outrage and consternation among both officials and ordinary citizens. His statement that a Canadian advertisement quoting former President Reagan was allegedly a means of foreign interference took everyone by surprise and called into question the entire course of the trade negotiations, which were in full swing. For reasons that are unclear, the U.S. representative linked a simple economic discussion to accusations of subversive activity, which came as a real shock to everyone who had expected a professional and respectful dialogue. The situation took on an even more dramatic tone when the ambassador moved from words to threats, hinting that Canada risked serious consequences for its allegedly undesirable activity in American domestic politics. Many observers argue that this behavior is part of a broader strategy by the U.S. administration aimed at exerting economic pressure and suppressing Canada's independent position. In addition, rumors circulated behind the scenes at the conference that the American side was deliberately using aggressive rhetoric to intimidate Canadian leaders and force them to back down. This conflict is not simply a diplomatic incident, but rather the result of deep mistrust and tension that has built up over recent months due to a series of tariff wars and mutual accusations. Canada responded to U.S. tariffs with countermeasures, which only exacerbated the situation and led to economic instability in the region. According to unofficial information, representatives of the Canadian government have even prepared a plan to reduce dependence on the American market and establish new trade ties with Asia and Europe in order to counter pressure from the South. These measures are seen as a strategic response to policies that threaten Canada's sovereignty and prosperity. The diplomat who caused this scandal is no stranger to such provocations. In the past, he has repeatedly caused recipient states to shudder with his harsh and inappropriate statements. In one of his previous postings, he accused European countries of social unrest and even violence, drawing international condemnation. This reputation only exacerbates the recent conflict, as many perceive his current actions as part of a deliberate campaign to destabilize and intimidate Canada. Sentiment in Canadian society has become seriously inflamed. Many see the American ambassador's behavior not only as a diplomatic scandal, but also as an attempt to undermine national unity and exert pressure on the country's internal political processes. There is speculation that the ambassador's actions were sanctioned at the highest level and serve as a means of sending a strong message to Canada and its partners. There are even rumors that his subsequent speech may have contained veiled threats about future cooperation in the field of defense and security, including discussions of the possible cancellation of joint projects. Such a sharp attack on a friendly country did not go unanswered. Representatives of the Canadian government have already indicated that future relations with the United States will be determined not by threats, but by honest and mutual respect. At the same time, they emphasize that Canada is ready to use all diplomatic tools, including the expulsion of undesirable diplomats, if the situation requires decisive measures. It is reported that preparations are underway to create new international alliances to reduce economic vulnerability and increase independence on the world stage. Thus, what was initially a calm and technical forum has turned into a real political crisis, revealing not only tensions between the two countries, but also deeper processes of redistribution of influence on a global scale. The ambassador, whose words and actions have so shaken Canada, has become a symbol of an era in which traditional diplomatic channels are too often replaced by sharp political maneuvers, and trust between allies collapses as quickly as stability in global markets. This incident could be a starting point for rethinking not only Canadian-American relations, but the entire system of international communications in the coming years. The diplomatic crisis that is gaining momentum did not arise out of nowhere. Behind the ambassador's loud statements lies a whole political context that explains why the current tension has reached such proportions. It is no secret that relations between Canada and the U.S. have been going through difficult times for a long time, especially given the consequences of the trade wars introduced by the Trump administration and the struggle for influence within the American political scene. Of course, those who have been following previous events closely know that the details of the conflict were discussed in the first part of our story. But there is much more to these statements than just a momentary quarrel. It is part of a deep strategic game in which each side is trying to defend its markets, resources, and political influence. According to the latest, and somewhat sensational, information from unverified sources, U.S. government circles were developing special plans to increase pressure on Canada long before the incident with the ambassador. These plans included not only strengthening tariff barriers on critical Canadian goods, but also organizing a targeted information campaign to curb Canada's growing economic influence on the international stage. Moreover, there are rumors that certain groups within the White House even initiated meetings with American business circles to prepare a platform for Canada's economic isolation, using media leverage. Of course, there is no direct evidence of such initiatives yet, but their trajectory coincides with the rhetoric of the ambassador and the entire administration. In addition to this, we should not forget the geopolitical aspects. The U.S. has traditionally viewed Canada as one of its key partners, but there are now signs that Washington is increasingly viewing its northern neighbor through the prism of competition with other world powers, primarily China and Russia. In this new reality, the concepts of friendship and alliance have not disappeared, but they have given way to pragmatism and even suspicion. According to insiders, it is in light of these factors that the ambassador was sent to Canada with a specific mission: to demonstrate toughness and prevent Washington from softening its position on key trade and security issues. When considering U.S. diplomatic strategy, one cannot ignore historical precedents when similar accusations were used as a tool for political pressure and disorientation. We have already mentioned that in the recent past, President Trump not only played on the diplomatic field, but also openly threatened Canada with economic blackmail, not shying away from unflattering comparisons and disruptions in cooperation. However, few people remember that the U.S. has a long history of interfering in the affairs of other countries, from Latin America to the Middle East, including such well-known operations as election interference and the overthrow of governments. This heavy baggage calls into question the moral authority of American accusations and reveals double standards that manifest themselves time and time again. In this context, the actions of the American ambassador appear to be a grotesque illustration of hypocrisy. He accuses Canada of covert interference in elections, while forgetting the history of numerous confirmed cases of direct and covert influence on political processes in other countries by his own government. Moreover, some experts are convinced that the ambassador's latest statement was not just a mistake, but a deliberate provocation aimed at diverting attention from the U.S.'s internal problems and discrediting the Canadian state on the international stage. There have even been unverified reports of secret instructions received by the ambassador recommending that pressure be increased and scandalous statements be used as a means of media warfare. No less resonance was caused by the fact that such accusations were made in response to publications and advertisements quoting Reagan, which were aimed not at interfering in the elections, but at simply explaining economic mechanisms. This underscores how willing the American side is to interpret any gesture as hostile, turning the most innocuous manifestations into a reason for escalation. Thus, one gets the impression that what we are witnessing is not a dialogue but a chain of mutual accusations and manipulations, each of which is designed to reinforce someone's political agenda, often without any real basis. There is also a clear inconsistency. While the U.S. accuses Canada of interference, American political circles themselves have ties to a number of movements and individuals involved in scandals and protests on Canadian territory, which has been repeatedly documented by outside observers and the media. There is a clear sense of double standards when a major power tries to dictate terms without regard for its partner's interest and ignoring its own shortcomings. Such an approach is bound to provoke protest and rejection from the Canadian public and authorities, who, despite diplomatic politeness, are increasingly vocal about the need to modernize foreign policy and seek new allies. Ultimately, this incident reveals a complex game of interest and contradictions, in which the truth often lies somewhere in the middle, and diplomacy becomes an arena for the struggle for dominance. In such conditions, not only the context of international relations comes to the fore, but also demonstrations of power, attention to internal political considerations, and the desire of each side to save face. This situation is a harsh lesson for all involved, showing that reputation and trust are earned over years,